What about this Trump economy? It's unbelievable. Joining us now to kind of filter all this out is Congressman Dave Brat. He represents the 7th District of Virginia. That's the Central Virginia area around the suburbs of Richmond. And he is up for re-election for a third term on November the 6th. And he is running against the Democratic nominee, Abigail Spanberger, in what many see as a very, very close race. Dr. Brat, good to have you with us. Friday, job numbers come out. Over 202,000 jobs created last month in the month of August. Along with that, that exceeded expectations. Unemployment staying at 3.9%, which means that additional Americans are entering the job market that have set out for a while. That's expanding the base. Blue-collar jobs, manufacturing jobs, highest increase we've had in 30 years. And wages going up 2.7% for the third consecutive quarter. So jobs going up, wages rising, more Americans entering the job market. We're expected to get 4.5% growth in the quarter we're in now. What are the Democrats saying about this economy?
Well, you just asked the exact right question, and thanks for having me on. The Democrats are talking about books and white noise up in the bubble because they're on the record saying tax cuts wouldn't work, and my opponent said tax cuts are dangerous, and Pelosi said tax cuts are Armageddon. And so this is the story of 2018, right? You won't see it on the liberal newspapers, but this booming, total successful economy is the story of 2018. And so the Democrats don't have much to say, so they go elsewhere. But the big new breaking news there was the wage rate growth at 3%, and that's what you would expect. The Democrats also got wrong, in addition to their economic forecast. They said all the money's going to flow into stock buybacks and all that. That's false. The money actually flowed into capital investment, and capital investment is what causes long-term economic growth. And if you put capital in the hands of the American worker, you get productivity increases, and that is the same thing as wage increases. So that it's all the virtuous cycle we knew would happen. I ran on economics. I taught economics, PhD, for 20 years. I said, let's do this. I ran on it, and now it's happening. And I think the American people are going to reward us. And this will take away from that great blue wave in a significant way.
I just don't know what the Democrats are running on in this economy. One of the things that you pointed out, Congressman, that I want to spend a couple of minutes on is, for basically 9 months, the Democrats and the fake newsers at CNN kept telling us that the tax cut was a fraud, that it was not going to help working people, that wages were not going to go up, that it wouldn't inspire any jobs, and that it was just basically a tax cut for big corporations and a windfall for the wealthiest 1%. Now, they had been saying that consistently for 9 months, and I kept saying, they're going to eventually get caught in the lie. It can only go so far. They can fundraise off it, but eventually people are going to see, well, I am getting more money in my pocket. I do have a better job. I do have a raise. I do have more opportunity. And the other thing about this economy, Congressman, that nobody is talking about is the number of people now leaving job A to go to job B, which was not happening during the Obama economy because people were scared to leave their job and go to a different job because if things didn't work out, they might not get hired again. That's the other untold story. That's also driving up wages, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. That is a huge point. We don't often point that out, but that labor mobility piece.
Labor mobility.
Huge. Yeah, I mean it's huge in terms of a thriving economy because that shows you that people are moving up the wage ladder, right? They're moving up. They take an entry-level skill job, and then they move up, and that's the American dream. And so that's been on hold for 10 years under Democrat logic. The Democrats, Spanberger and Pelosi and all of them said, you just get used to 2% economic growth, right? That was their model. We're just stuck in this new normal. Krugman, all the liberals lectured us forever. I think the saying was, what's Trump going to do? Wave a magic wand? Well, no magic wand, just economic fundamentals. We got them right. You deregulate and you make it easier and cheaper for business to do business. And guess what's happening? You get more business. And so that produces labor mobility, wage rates up. Kids are getting jobs out of college. It's just tremendously good news. And the Democrats are just silent, right? The Democrats, my opponent, Spanberger, came in on health care huge until she found out her proposal was $32 trillion and would double tax rates to pay for that socialized piece of health care. That would have devastated the economy. And so they're running on getting rid of the tax cuts, increasing taxes to pay for a $32 trillion program, and having open borders that my opponent is in favor of, which also reduces wage rates for American workers. So, I mean, no wonder they're silent right now. I mean, it is just stunning.
Well, that's the dilemma that the Democrats have. I mean, they're trying to ride the wave of Trump sucks. They don't like his tweets. He's unhinged. But the bottom line is this is Trump's economy. And if you compare it to what we were in under the Obama administration, you can't even compare the two. And the tax cuts, this is the other thing. The tax cuts haven't even actually hit. They don't really hit people until next April. So this is just a residual anticipatory effect of what is going to happen. And businesses know that they can buy equipment now and write the whole thing off. That's what I was talking to a gentleman that owns a small trucking company. And he says that his drivers are now at full employment. He's got to get new trucks because the orders for trucking equipment that's being purchased by businesses is off the charts. And so as a result, his trucking business is booming. I mean, the residual effect of this goes on and on. Congressman in Idlib in Syria now, we have a very serious situation. This is the final stronghold that the non-Assad forces or the rebels have. The offense by the Assad regime, backed by the Russians and the Iranians, has started. Bombs are now dropping. Idlib has 1.2 million people in it, and these really are people that don't want to be part of the Assad regime. That's why they went to Idlib. If this offensive continues, we're going to have a humanitarian crisis there beyond anything that anybody's seen in this 7-year war. What should be our position now?
Well, I think you see that the White House and the president and Congress, and I think the American people are on board now. This is why we're trying to shore up European power and get conversations going with the superpowers, China, Russia, et cetera, so that we can put some leverage on them. And the more leverage you put on China and Russia on those issues, the less you see them engaging in this kind of thing. This is still the result of leading from behind, where Russia thinks they can usurp part of the Ukraine, take Crimea, et cetera, without consequence, which is what happened to the Obama regime. And so we've started the process of shoring up the power and putting sanctions on these countries, et cetera. But I think it's going to involve getting Europe and the U.S. to put pressure on Russia and China and the rest of the world. And in the short run, you're right. The U.S. is always a compassionate country, so we're going to do our best to help the folks under siege. But a new foreign policy is underway where we lead with strength ahead of time so that you don't run into these situations. And unfortunately, that's not what the last decade was.
The last offensive by the Assad government, backed by the Russians in Idlib, is going to cause, several 100,000 people in the short term to seek refugee status, probably across the Turkish border. And so I think the U.S. has some role to play here in negotiating a safe haven for them. Because, look, you're not going to stop Assad from taking the last stronghold that the rebels have. And once the Assad government military is in control of Idlib, that's it. Then they have control of the entire Syria country back. And obviously then the question becomes, what's the government going to look like? How does it play out? What role do the Iranians have there? What role do the Russians have? Obviously, they backed the regime in taking Syria back, and so they're all going to be involved in it. And so I think there's going to have to be a significant U.S. diplomatic effort. We'll see that as it goes forward. The op-ed in the New York Times by what I think is a never Trump Republican, what did you make of that?
Well, the humorous aspect of it was the New York Times at least finally put something on the opinion page. Usually that's on the news page, and that's a sad day, right? The New York Times and the Washington Post have lost all semblance of news organization. And so this is just one more step, right? We'll eventually find out, who this person is and how senior they are, but it's probably just some frustrated person who differs. And all the senior heavy hitters have already disavowed. And so it's just a bunch of nonsense, shift the dialogue back away from the economy. And as I said, the opening line is that the 2008 economy in the United States of America is the story. It is great news for everybody up and down the entire economic ladder. Wage rates are up. 100 million Walmart shoppers have retail sales through the roof. My opponent, Spanberger, says, don't look at the 4.2 economic growth. It's not kitchen table. Well, tell that to the 100 million Walmart shoppers that are busting sales records and going through the roof. So that is the story. And unfortunately, conservatives don't own many newspapers or much of the mainstream media. And so the left is doing everything they can to keep that story from being the story. And that's what this is all about.
Your campaign against Abigail Spanberger, how would you sum it up right now?
Well, kind of the way we're summing up this conversation about the real world, I usually just run on the real world. And so on the economy, we're winning. On health care, we're winning. Obamacare failed. It's socialized health care. They want to add more socialism to it, $32 trillion, double the taxes. We want to have the rule of law. We want to respect our police officers, our ICE officers. We don't want sanctuary cities. Spanberger wants sanctuary cities. They want open borders to lower wage rates for the working class. And so that's how I sum it up. On policy, we're winning across the board. And then Spanberger does not have an agenda that she's running on, and she's just had problems with transparency across the board, including the latest story having to do with her teaching at this Saudi-funded terror school dubbed Terror High. And so none of her secret information should have been let out. But on the other hand, she was concealing that teaching information from her voters. And why is that? And so I think the voters deserve to know, why did she not put that on her resume? It's her judgment related to teaching at a school. That's the issue. It's just very clear. How do you teach at a school? And I'm fairly sure the Washington Post did series on that school before she worked there, right? So the left is trying to spin neat little spin stories on this. But how do you go to work at a school that is anti-Jewish, anti-Christian, anti-women, and anti-American in their curriculum across the board? That's the issue. And so she has not given a response to that, because all she did, she went to the New York Times and said she's proud of everything. In retrospect, she found out, they produced terrorists that went to Al-Qaeda, et cetera. So I don't understand her response. And so voters are waiting to hear her responses on all of the agenda items we just discussed and on her biography. What is her background? If she concealed that, is she concealing other items? And it matters to voters.
Well, I think that Abigail definitely has to answer why she made the decision to teach there. And I think that is, that's a question that I have, because there's no question that Abigail Spanberger has a very impressive resume, Congressman, no question about that. And there's also no question about her level of intelligence or her understanding of world affairs. I don't think there's any question there. So you have to ask and say to yourself, okay, let me get this straight. You're in between jobs and you've got an opportunity to do probably anything because you're a really talented woman, and you decide to take this substitute teaching job at a school that they dubbed Terror High. And by the way, it was dubbed Terror High not by Fox News, but by the Associated Press, right? Big difference.
Right.
And the school has produced a multitude of terrorists. Chuck Schumer, the Senate minority leader, not exactly what you would call someone on the conservative or Republican side, right? The exact opposite. I mean, he wanted it shut down. He had major issues with it. It's been called anti-Christian, anti-Semitic, anti-Israel by a number of news outlets and other people. So my question is, why would you accept a job to teach there? I think that needs to be answered. Like, why did you decide this is a good opportunity for me as I'm in between jobs, and why not teach at any other school, which you probably would have been hired at? Don't you think that's a legitimate question that
sure.
Ms.
And the more
Spanberger has to
go
answer?
Investigate the school, just Google that school, and you'll see that the quotes coming out of the curriculum at that school with the anti-Semitism and anti-Christian and anti-American, they taught anti-American bias at the school. And so if she says she's proud of it, then why didn't she put that on her biography? And that's a big question. And I'm not willing to forego the question. You started off saying no one can question her foreign policy expertise, et cetera. I don't know what it is. She hasn't answered questions on Russia or China policy or Syria policy that I've heard out in public under Q&A like I do every week. And so I don't see that ground. She ran as a Democrat, and Obama led from behind. And does she accept that strategy, or does she reject that failed strategy? And we haven't heard answers to any of that. So I don't see any ground on that.
There's a lot of issues that we have to get Abigail Spanberger to come down on one way or the other. Certainly what we're going to do now with the Syrian situation, how we're going to handle that. We've also got, a major crisis congressman in Yemen where we're backing the Saudi Emirates coalition, and we've been aiding, along with the United Kingdom, the Saudi effort against the Houthis. I know we talked about that a week ago. And General Mattis he's in the Emirates now. He's in the UAE now, I believe. He just went there to try to figure out what some of these issues are. But look, what is your position? Let's just get there. What is your position on our alliance with the Emiratis and the Saudis as it pertains to them still advancing this war in Yemen, where 50,000 civilians so far have been killed?
Well, I mean, it's the same on every issue. We have to engage in any area that affects U.S. self-interest. And so obviously the Middle East is part of that. And so we're engaged. But Yemen and that relationship with the Saudis raises all sorts of issues. Mm-hmm. And so that's what our foreign policy folks are putting together, an overall strategy. But it's what you just got done saying, right? That we don't have enough levers and pressure against the superpowers who can end all of this, and the Saudis, we can end this stuff immediately, right? Most of these countries have to use access to run their dollars through U.S. banking system. That's a huge piece of leverage. We are the main funders of the IMF, World Bank, all the loans, UNESCO, all the poverty programs. When it comes to taking care of refugees and paying the bill through the UN, we pay the biggest share by far. And so we need to put leverage on all of these countries, and that's what the president is doing right now. He's starting to put all of that into play so that everybody knows that if you step out of bounds, there's a price to pay. And for the past decade, that has not been the case. So at the simplest level, that's what we need to do.
Well, look, I think that there needs to be a major diplomatic effort, and the only country can lead this is the U.S., and it has to be done in Yemen because it is a horrific situation. And the Saudis right now, Congressman, are really boxed in. I mean, MBS has no way out of this. He doesn't want to lose face there. They've lost billions of dollars. Now they're blowing up school buses. You can say it was a mistake. They blew up a market the other day with women and children, 50,000 casualties in Yemen, and there's no end to this. There's no end in sight. And the fact that the U.S. is backing this Saudi Emirates coalition, it puts us in a very dangerous place U.S. bombs are exploding on children. I mean, you have to really get your arms around this, and I think there has to be just a major diplomatic effort. Hopefully, General Mattis and his trip over there can start that. We're out of time.
Yeah, well, and just on that issue, I mean, Iran's in the middle of everything over there as well, right? And so what was the Obama regime's response, and how hard did we push on Iran? Not much. What are we doing now? A lot. So there's your contrast, just clear and simple.
Well, the reason we're involved in Yemen in the first place is because President Obama wanted the Iranian deal to go down, and when the Saudis and the Emirates were concerned about the Iranians with the support of the opposition in Yemen, Obama looked the other way, basically. He made a deal under the table, it appears, and that's why we're in there now. So, look, hindsight is 20/20, but I think the Yemeni situation is something that really the U.S. has to lead here and figure out a way to get out of this situation. Yep. We're out of time. Yep. Dave, thanks for being with us. More information, John. Go to davebrat.com.